Welcome to Sportsbeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog. I'm Blair Kerkhoff here with Chiefs beat writer Pete Sweeney. And for the first time in 7 months, Pete, it's game week.
Yeah, the opening game's a few days away here. I think over the recent years, we've gotten really used to the Chiefs just deciding to play on random days. A little bit less this year than last year, but it does start with a random day on Friday night from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I think what has been a theme this week is a lot of these players and coaches just talking about the uniqueness and the challenges that come with having to play in Brazil.
And it's an 11-hour flight for the Chiefs. I mean, for Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian, who will be there for the Star, it's longer than that because they're connecting and the Chiefs are chartering down. It's an 11-hour flight for them. That is quite the haul.
Yeah, and from what we've heard, I think a couple of us have heard this and we've kind of talked about it, within the newsroom and at the facility. There's a little bit of an advantage difference between the home and away team where the Chargers they're giving up their LA game, which, by the way, I'm sure the LA contingent of Chiefs fans not thrilled about that with how many red jerseys are there, but they're giving up their home game. But there's an advantage on the ground where their hotel and bus ride will be a lot closer than the Chiefs, even though it's not so far away. Our understanding is because of the congestion, it'll take quite a while, even on game day. I mean, they're going down on Wednesday, but this is like Friday. It'll take a while for the Chiefs to get there, an hour or 2 hours, whereas it seems like a quicker trip for the Chargers. And so, interesting. I mean, the NFL wants to continue to expand, and I think you understand that. But I think sometimes when you see the logistics of this stuff, you wonder if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak, I think.
You can't have a game farther away from a U.S. city than where the Chiefs and Chargers are playing on Friday.
Right.
Unless you're in Asia or Australia or New Zealand. I mean, it is as when the Chiefs went to Germany, when they went to London, Mexico City, those were all long flights. Mm-hmm. But this is unique, and you're right. We've talked to the players and to Andy Reid about it, and they're all excited. They're saying the right things. I think when they get back, especially if it doesn't turn out well for them, when they get back, we'll maybe get a little different story. An 11-hour flight to come home, after playing a game, that is a big ask.
And you think about the team that loses. I mean, this game is, if you look at the odds, it's within under a touchdown. So, either team reasonably, no Chiefs fan wants to hear this, but either team reasonably could win or lose. And now you're flying back, probably longer for the Chargers if they lead. And that's a miserable flight back. It's a lot easier to fly back with all these hours when you're coming back with a victory. And before we get into anything else, Blair, I think this is a good time to say is Blair and I won't be in Brazil. We're leaving that to Sam and Vahe. We'll be at KC Beer Cove for a subscriber watch party. I think we're going to stick around for the beginning of it. We'll have a Q&A. And so please come and hang out with us if you want to check that out.
Absolutely. Come and join us. I think it's $15 and you get some good stuff for that price. Yeah. So this is Chiefs season number 66, number 63 in Kansas City. It's number 13 for Andy Reid, number 13 for Travis Kelce. It's Patrick Mahomes' 9th season, his 8th as a starter, and they're opening it in Brazil. Before we talk about the game itself, I wanted to go back to last week in the roster cut to 53, and we made our predictions. Everybody makes their predictions. We missed a couple, as did everybody. But what surprised you most about what the Chiefs did last week?
Well, I think there's some minor surprises. I think the biggest surprise to all of us when you glance at the roster is seeing 8 receivers. A little bit of a different reason for Kansas City. It wasn't necessarily that they wanted 8 receivers on an initial roster. This was more of a procedural thing. We had mentioned that was a possibility as we talked about the projection where, you could have a Robert Tonyan who is a vested veteran. You cut him and he's not subject to waivers and claims. And so it seemed like there was a little bit of a procedural move to cut Tonyan for a day because the Chiefs knew that the Rashee Rice suspension was coming very shortly after the cut down. he's certainly not cutting Rice or they're not doing anything crazy like that. And so Rice very quickly goes to the suspended list. Tunyon comes back onto the 53-man roster. Well deserved, by the way, after the training camp and preseason that he had, and even earned a nickname from Travis Kelce, Big Bob, which seems like something that they are talking about behind the scenes. But I also think what plays into keeping 8 receivers was just this idea that you're not going to probably have Jalen Royals for this first game. So 8 becomes 6 very quickly. And to me, and I don't know, that, again, not so surprising, but like that was pretty glaring when you see 8 receivers on an initial roster.
It really was. They've never kept as many as 8.
Right.
But you're right, because we get the news in the following days that Rashee Rice and the NFL had come to an agreement on the length of the suspension and the time it would be served, which is 6 games at the beginning of the season. So that means he's not going to be available until mid-October. The wide receiver room, again, without likely Jalen Royals, now includes Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, Jason Brownlee, Nico Remigio.
I find this funny a little bit in terms of like fantasy football. The Chiefs have a couple of these, like they call them in fantasy football, touchdown vultures on the team now, and Noah Gray is one of them. If you're like a Pacheco guy, sometimes they put Kareem Hunt in, and you're just like, what? And now Jason Brownlee, very quietly, could be that guy where maybe you have Patrick or Bones is a different one, but maybe you have Xavier Worthy or Hollywood Brown in your roster, and all of a sudden they're just like, no, let's throw it up to the big man, Jason Brownlee. Very interesting to keep him. I thought for a long time within this wide receiver room, it was a choice between Brownlee and Remigio, and I think it's weird to say this, but I think it's more quiet volumes that they said we don't want to lose Brownlee and we don't want to lose Remigio. 2 guys that probably won't see a ton of offensive snaps, but the value was high enough that the Chiefs and Brett Veach said, no, we don't want to lose either of these guys.
That made me wonder how much Brownlee's touchdown catch against the Cardinals in the first preseason game helped solidify his spot on the team. It looked so good, and that back shoulder reception from 1 yard out was a real highlight play of the preseason games for the Chiefs. And with Remigio, every time Dave Tobe speaks, it's in this definitive form. Remigio is our punt returner and our kickoff return guy. And even though he doesn't have the great speed, he seems to be the most trustworthy back there.
We had a sit down with Brett Veach, and Blair, you might agree with me in this. I love when we have these sit downs with him because I feel like, and this is just Brett Veach, I guess, but this is anyone. It just feels like he's more comfortable talking with us. And one thing that he mentioned to us in this setting is that in context of Remigio, I think he said something to the extent of Dave Tobe gets one of these every year. Where
yes, that's exactly what he
said. Where Dave Tobe pushed for this guy. We knew he would be pushing for this guy. And I think when you watch the preseason and when you watch training camp, I think Kansas City was very hopeful that Brashard Smith would step up and be so sure, so 100% locked in that they could go in that direction. And I think he's coming along, but it just wasn't to the point where I think you could cut Remigio. And what helped Remigio too is not only Dave Tope, it's like Remigio's his son, but I think the kickoff rule changing was very big because Kansas City's really prioritizing that. We saw it in the preseason. Now the touchback goes to the 35. And so there's just going to be so many more return opportunities. And if you're going to have an increase in return opportunities, you're going to want to have your best returner.
Right. Back to Brashard Smith for a second. We're always trying to sleuth around and pick up on hints when coaches speak at the podium. And I won't forget Andy Reid saying, I can't remember if it was at the end of St. Joseph or at the beginning of the training camp in Kansas City, that Brashard Smith had turned a corner.
Right.
And once you heard that, I at that point knew, well, his roster position is they're going to keep him. And and now you have to start, if you're looking for cuts at wide receiver or running back, look elsewhere because he's going to make the team.
I always thought running back coming into training camp, I always was sure, maybe I was wrong for this because I know Smith was a 7th rounder. I just felt he was gadgety and fun enough that I locked him in, and I knew Pacheco would make it. And again, this is ahead of training camp. I had questions about Kareem Hunt and Elijah Mitchell and Carson Steele. I thought the front and the end were pretty locked in. And then we quickly saw Hunt had some extra juice that maybe he didn't have last year early on in training camp. You're like, okay, he's in. We had our questions about Elijah Mitchell and Carson Steele. Sounds to us like, again, going back to the beach availability that we got to talk with them, it sounds like the Chiefs will have Pacheco, Hunt, and Smith up to me, and Mitchell becomes your honorary Ronald Jones, break the glass if you need him. And now deeper in the running back room, and this is an interesting point, Carson Steele gets through waivers, which we expected. I don't think any of us necessarily thought that Steele would be picked up. So he becomes your 5th running back on the practice squad, and then an old friend, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, finds his way back to Kansas City, a former first-rounder, waiting in the wings if you end up in a dire scenario and get to your 6th running back.
I was surprised by that. You spent a couple of the final 2 games of last season with the Saints, or 2 of the last 3. I can't remember exactly what, but he was in 2 games for the Saints after the Chiefs bid him farewell in early December last season. Former first-round pick. He's now back on back in Kansas City. It seems like the Saints, the Chiefs have this 2-way street going with players, and actually the Chiefs seem to have that with other teams as well. Texans, the Jets,
yes,
they stash them for a while, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire back in Kansas City. He did something about the way that I don't know, when you come up, playing for the Chiefs coaches and in the system here, there's a familiarity, there's a trust, and this is my long-winded way of getting around to Derek Nottie.
Yeah.
And why he is back with the Chiefs. And another one of those interesting roster moves, releasing Mike Pennell.
That dynamic, and again, maybe it isn't the casual Chiefs fan who only watches on Sunday and tunes in, but this is a topic that is in deep-rooted Chiefs X, the artist formerly known as Twitter right now, where a lot of people are wondering what happened. And there's some oddness to this. I think if you're just trying to look for a one-liner explainer, I think the Chiefs want to be younger at defensive tackle, and Mike Pennell is an older player. But not bringing him back on the practice squad was surprising to me. And then, I mentioned this to you guys, and this is coming from Pete Sweeney. This isn't really touching base with Mike or his people or anything. He chose the Cincinnati Bengals. If you're looking to maybe stick it to the Chiefs, and who knows if this is real or whatever, I mean, you're choosing Baltimore, Buffalo, or Cincinnati. Those are the 3 teams you're probably looking at. At this point, even a division team wouldn't matter as much as the teams we just mentioned. And so ends up on the Bengals practice squad, and we'll see if he is eventually elevated to be a run stuffer for them.
I always think there's something to players when they're released by the Chiefs, ending up at a rival or a team with a little bit more of a purpose when it comes to playing the Chiefs, if for no other reason to get as much playbook information as possible. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what were you guys doing over there? What what was your what did Spags have you doing on this? And of course, that's just kind of common practice in the NFL, but it shouldn't be surprising that he ends up on something of a rival team.
Yeah, we saw the same exact thing with Orlando Brown, and I think Orlando Brown was a little bit hard pressed to find someone that was going to pay him what he wanted, but the same type of thing. You're just like, okay, Cincinnati, all right. I mean, they've been right there. I know, they missed the playoffs last year. They made an adjustment in the preseason to play a little bit more of their starters to try to get off to a better start. That has been the Cincinnati Achilles heel, where they just have had these slow starts, 0-2, 1-4. So, they really. So we'll see what Pennell does in Cincy. Speaking of Blair, the tips that you get from former players, Christian Fulton this week. Steve Spagnuolo said he went right up to Christian Fulton to ask about the Chargers. Played for the Chargers last year. Was part of the worst play of the season for Kansas City. Coney intercepted that pass, and it led to the disaster with Rashee Rice and Patrick Mahomes. But I thought what was unique about the 53, just kind of segueing to the defensive backs, is that you end up with a bunch of cornerbacks, 6 cornerbacks, including Josh Williams, who we had written off. Najee Johnson going to IR, I think, helped him, but only 3 safeties on his initial roster. And one in Shamari Connor that you mainly play as a cornerback.
Yep.
So it feels a little light in the safety room, but it's unique. They kept 26 offensive players and then just a 24 defensive.
So safety is a slight position of concern for me, but let's do this. Let's stop looking back. We'll start looking ahead after this break.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
We are back on Sportsbeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports Podcast, with Chiefs beat writer Pete Sweeney. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Pete, we've looked back on the Chiefs and what they did with the roster. Let's look ahead to the game on Friday against the LA Chargers in Brazil and the rest of the season. Before we went to the break, you had mentioned what their secondary and what's going on. I'm a little concerned about the safety position, not just because of the numbers, but this is the first time in quite a while they don't have that sort of alpha dog player back there. They don't have Eric Berry. They don't have Tyrann Mathieu. They don't have Justin Reed. Listen, those guys, they change their positions a little. You call them a free or a strong safety, but whatever the case, they were sort of the captains of the defensive backfield, and that person's not there. That's my concern about them.
Well, you have Chris Jones in the front of the defense, who we know can be loud and encouraging, but it always felt like he had a counterpart in the back end where, Tyrann Mathieu, you want to go back to Eric Berry that kind of passed it along to Tyrann Mathieu. And then you brought in Justin Reed, a little bit more, I would say, mild-mannered on game day than maybe a Mathieu or a Berry, but still could get loud and get in these guys and motivate them and encourage them if need be.
You trusted him. I mean, you just trusted him to make a play.
When you think about the personality, I'm just talking from even like an off the field. When you look at and just to run through them in that safety room, we're talking about Brian Cook and Jaden Hicks and Shamari Connor. In the cornerback room, Fulton, McDuffie, Jalen Watson. Beyond them, Noel Williams, Chris Roland Wallace, Joshua. It's just like a mild-mannered defensive back room. I think the best candidate to maybe be a loud voice is Brian Cook. We've seen a little bit of that, but this is really a back end that is waiting for a vocal leader. I think Trent McDuffie wants to be a leader, but he's going to be more of some guy that does it by example. I just wonder, in the back end huddle, who's the guy that's being, y'all boys ready? Hell yeah. Or Tyrann Mathieu, it's our day, championship swag, like that type of thing. I know it's a little thing, but I just feel like that stuff matters when you're getting motivated for a game.
It's a thing. It's a thing. I also noticed we've gotten into the Chiefs locker room for the first time this week. And that locker closest to the open area where the defensive backs are, that was Tyrann Mathieu's space, and then Justin Reed's space. And I notice it's Trent McDuffie's space now. Yeah. There's a significance to that, to whose locker that is.
Well, again, the locker room dynamic is a little bit inside football, but corner lockers are highly sought after.
Yeah, that's real. That's good real estate.
Patrick Mahomes has a double corner locker. Travis Kelce has a double corner locker. You notice Juju Smith-Schuster, when you walk in the wide receiver room, he has the corner locker. That because you're not next to somebody on the other side. And so this one has a lot of open space even next to that. And so, yeah, it's little things, but it does identify, like Isiah Pacheco is another one. It does identify players that have really earned, all right, this guy's really important to us winning football games. And so, Yeah, I mean, I think if you had to choose a leader at a defensive back room, you probably go with the two-time All-Pro. But it's just a little bit of a different feel when they don't, to me, necessarily have that Barry Matthew Reed fire. It's going to be a little bit different.
I say this about the safeties in the secondary, but I think my bigger concern on defense is at tackle. And we touched on Derek Nottie in the previous segment, but I just can't get out of my head the performance of the Chiefs in that second preseason game against the Seahawks when Mike Bennell and Jerry Tillery were the starters and the Seahawks just, went up and down the field. Now, Chris Jones didn't play in that game. I don't know if Omar Norman, I think he was hurt, Norman Lott. But it really surprised me what happened in that game. And now, with Nottie maybe starting on Friday, I don't know how strong that position is.
My position concerns are right with you. I'd go safety, defensive tackle, and running back, and more running back just for like a depth. Safety and defensive tackle, you wonder about the right now. And I think, and again, you always say this, like you're never rooting for injuries if you're a fan. I think a huge break for Kansas City is that Rashawn Slater went down.
Yes. Because
you were looking at a tackle situation where you had Slater and then a name familiar to Kansas City, Joe Alt. And that's a pretty good tackle tandem. And they got a pretty good interior of that. They ended up moving Alt to the left side. Now they'll have Trey Pipkins at right tackle, which obviously is weaker than what would have been the Slater-Alt combination. But man, you got this running back that is ready for his first game, fresh legs out of college in Omarion Hampton. I know a lot of people were going crazy about Ashton Jeanty, but very quietly, this could be, an offensive rookie of the year candidate. And this is going to be a test early. I mean, I know it's not a household name, and when it isn't yet, hey, in week 4 last year, Ladd McConkey wasn't necessarily a household name. Everyone knows who that is. And so this is a big test. And you're right, there were a lot of starters missing in Seattle. It felt like, and I think Steve Spagnuolo admitted this, I didn't have my guys ready. We were sort of lollygagging and got shocked. But regardless of 1, 2, 3 starters missing, there were players on the field that are going to play on Friday night. There was 114 rushing yards from the running backs and 10 carries. Yeah. And that's alarming, and I think you're going to want to – and look, they came back out against Chicago and looked better. Chicago was playing its starters too. But again, I'm with you. I just think this is what LA wants to do. I mean, this is Jim Harbaugh football, right? They want to really reestablish the run, and they're going to be tested early. And unless they answer, you got to be ready for. And we talked about it earlier. You're in different conditions in Brazil. I mean, you got to be ready for the first snap.
And, you mentioned Omarion Hampton, the rookie. Najee Harris may be playing in this game.
The Pirate.
That's right. 1,000-yard rusher each of his 4 seasons with the Steelers and came over to the Chargers this year. This is what Jim Harbaugh wants to do, right? He wants a strong running game. He wants to play great defense. He wants to play NFL football the way it was played, in the 1950s. And he's building a team that can accomplish that. But he also has some weapons in the passing game as well. And it's funny with Justin Herbert. I think he won 2 of his first 3 games against the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. One of them he went against Chiefs backups in one of those Week 18 games where the Chiefs had already clinched their playoff position.
The Chase Daniel honorary backup game.
Yeah.
Right.
I think they give a trophy for that.
Yeah, of course.
But since then he's lost I don't know how many 4 or 5 in a row.
Well, the talent is there. I mean, his thing has been the playoffs.
Yeah.
Can't really get that playoff victory. Just a quick point on Harris, just to explain my joke. On 4th of July, unfortunately, I don't know why we're laughing about this. Najee Harris, he had a firework accident where he's had problems with one of his eyes, and he was out for a long time. I wonder about the vision of him. I mean, I know they're trying to make it work. I wonder how much vision he has. I feel like eyes of all positions, and quarterback certainly, but next it's probably running back or defensive back. They're always talking about eye level and so on. And so, I mean, I am curious to see what Najee Harris, if he does play in this game, looks like. Hampton to me is the one to watch. And then I wrote about this yesterday. They're going to be trying to find Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, speaking of eyes, that's what Steve Spagnuolo said
Yeah.
yesterday with the question you asked him about McConkey and how you need 22 eyes on him. Number 22 is important.
Right.
Not the uniform number 22, but
Right.
all 11 players knowing where Ladd McConkey is. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the established guys and what we expect from them this season. I think you'll agree that Patrick Mahomes has had a really nice preseason. Training camp was very good. The preseason games, I think he was the quarterback for 4 possessions, touchdowns on 3 of them, and a field goal on the 4th. Of course, one of them was just a short field after a fumbled kickoff. But anyway, did what he could do, almost maximize his the possessions there. I'm thinking it's going to be a better year for him statistically than it has been the previous 2 years.
Barring health, and what you always have to say, because the Chiefs were unlucky with that last year, it has to be. You think about it, I always try to go back to, because everyone has seen this clip, do we have time to run Wasp? Chiefs haven't had time to run Wasp in about 3 years.
Right.
So
they would never have run Wasp
Yeah.
since 2022.
if the protection is there and you actually give Mahomes time, where he's human, I know we hate to admit that, he gets happy feet if he feels unprotected at the beginning of the games. I thought the biggest thing that happened in preseason game 3 of all the good stuff was Kingsley Suamata'ia's performance, because I just think that is a key. Josh Simmons has went from question very quickly to answer to exclamation point answer. And so the only concern I think the Chiefs even have right now is, can Suamataia repeat a performance that he had in preseason game 3? And so you're coming off that. If Mahomes has the protection, even without Rashee Rice, you just think about the weapons. Pacheco looks like he has more juice. Travis Kelce does look like he's moving a little bit closer to where he was than maybe what we saw last year. Xavier Worthy's ready to take a step. You have Hollywood Brown, right? Naturally, the numbers should go up. The last time he had more than 5,000 yards was 2022, which we just talked about. Then you follow it up with 4,100, 3,900. It has to be better than those two numbers in 23 and 24.
All right, so let's set some over-unders. How about Patrick Mahomes' touchdown passes this year? What should be the over-under? What would Vegas establish as the over-under to get the money on both sides? He's had 20, is it 27 and 26 or 26 and 27 each of the last 2 years?
Right. We just talked about the big drop off. 22 was 41, which is a nice number. I know this is a player who had
MVP
who
year
had
for him.
50. Yeah. Then went 27 and 26. I think if you're looking at the last 2 years, just from what we're talking about, Blair, let's call that 26 and a half. That's right in the median. I think you got to add 5 touchdowns to that for me. So I'd say 31 and a half feels good. I don't have the exact over-unders. I know there's numbers out there, like if you go to your books, but I'd be surprised if that number isn't closer, because even before the 41, if you're looking at the stretch from 20 to 22, 38, 37, 41. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving Brett Veach the benefit of the doubt. I think they've done enough to add 5 to what the average has been the past 2 years.
Yeah, and I think the wide receiver room is stronger. I was going to ask you about the wide receivers and who you think the leading wide receiver is going to be in terms of catches and yards, because it's been a different player each of the last 3 years,
Right.
because of since Tyreek Hill, right? So each of the last 4 years, with Hill being starting that list, it was Juju Smith-Schuster in 22, Rashee Rice in 23, and of course Xavier Worthy last year. Who among the Chiefs becomes the leading wide receiver?
I think the obvious answer is Xavier Worthy because of the 6-game suspension. I mean, it would have certainly been Rashee Rice. So now you're spotting Worthy 6 games to have production. Like, what are his numbers after that stretch when he's going to be one of the primary targets? I mean, you're looking probably between 300 and 500 yards, I would guess. The funny thing about Rice, though, is if you really take the 3 games at the beginning of last year, I mean, he was producing at an unbelievable clip.
Yes, yeah.
I took those 3 games for an article. I can't remember if it was the old place or here, because my memory is getting at me. But if you stretched those 3 games of production over 17 games, that would have been over 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns. And so I think he has an outside chance. Playing 11 games as opposed to Xavier Worthy's 17 is what gets me, and I think the safe answer is Worthy. But, man, don't be surprised if Rice has a couple explosive games when he gets back, and it's a lot closer than you think, when you get to week 9, week 10.
Does Isiah Pacheco rush for 1,000 yards?
The safe answer for him is no, because he runs so hard that he's going to get himself injured at a certain point and miss a stretch of games.
And he never has. He hasn't.
Here's what's on his side. I mean, the durability should be theoretically better. He revealed to us during training camp that he put on a little bit of extra weight, and I mean that was an intentional thing to try to have a little bit more when you are getting viciously tackled. I don't know if it was a good sign that I saw him run face first into a garbage cannon wall at Arrowhead, not being able to stop.
That's right.
I don't, but it is a contract year for him. I do not think the Chiefs are going to want to retain Isiah Pacheco. They were in the hunt for maybe a running back in the draft. Didn't work out with where they ended up picking. I know that a lot of people were eyeing that Jeff Bassa spot for what could have been a running back. Didn't go in that direction. It's tough to pay a running back unless they're the CMC, Derrick Henry, Saquon level. And I like Isiah Pacheco a lot. He just is not there. And so I do think this is a very motivating year for him for a lot of reasons. And so, God, I want to say yes, but I really think the safe answer is no. He's gone 830, 935, and then 310 with the injury last year. It's just tough for me to think he can stay on the field for a full season. I feel similarly, unfortunately, about Hollywood Brown. It's hard to think that they're going to play more than 14 games.
Does Travis Kelce get 90 receptions?
I think Travis Kelce, this is so bizarre to say, I think he's under the radar in terms of on-field production. Like you have to, there's a big asterisk here, because everyone is watching him, and I think there's I listen to a lot of national podcasts, both in the actual football and the fantasy football realm. I enjoy fantasy football. This is my fandom that this is what I do with my friends. But I think he's under the radar. I think people saw the Super Bowl, and I think people saw maybe his sideline demeanor last year. A clip here and there. He was heavier last year. I mean, you could tell he was beefed up a little bit, and I think he's really motivated to not go out like that. I think he could get to 90 receptions, but I think he has an 1,000-yard season. And then I think what'll be interesting for a player again who's so on the radar, but I think under the radar, what if he does rip off 90 receptions for 1,100 yards? Are we still talking about him being done for sure?
That's a great question.
You know what I mean?
That becomes part of the narrative toward the end of the season if he's having the big numbers here. He was at 97 last year, and we thought it was as you mentioned, a down year for him.
I have a very interesting theory about Kelce, because let's say he has a resurgent year and is a lot closer to what we saw again 21-22. That was 1,100 yards, 1,300 yards. So let's say, for argument's sake, he gets to 85, 90 receptions, and let's even say maybe 1,050 yards. Now you're suddenly very close to Tony G too.
Yep.
And if you're feeling good, Chiefs have gone far. Maybe they win the championship again. That's hard for us to tell. I don't know. Could there be another team-friendly deal that he says, I can't give it up now. I don't want to miss more championships. I don't know. I think it is probably his last year, but I think there's a world where he looks really good this year and is wondering, could I even go again?
All right, last one in this realm. Chris Jones, 10 sacks. Hasn't had that in a couple years.
I think what helps him is I think George stands to get more attention, and I think a healthy Charles stands to get more attention. And if pass rush-wise, Omar Norman Lott and Ashton Gelati are as good as advertised, they may have to start getting attention. So maybe he gets less triple teams and more double teams, and maybe the double teams allow him to get there. I think he really wants to. That's been one of the more surprising things. He's been so into the offseason, especially during those contract seasons. You could tell he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be at training camp. I mean, I think he was at every OTA look that we had. We only get 3 of the 10 OTA looks, but I'm pretty sure he was out there for almost all of the 10 OTA practices and certainly mandatory minicamp. He's in great shape. and seems motivated. I think just given everything we said, I think it's a possibility. Hasn't done it since 23 with 10.5. But I think he was motivated by his number of 5 last year. As much as he likes to say and smile and joke around about sacks, I think that annoyed him.
Yes.
And so I think he's a lot closer than he was last year, at least.
All right. What are you feeling for a final record, regular season?
Yeah, they have an extra game, and they were winning 11 games a year with Alex Smith. So, right, it's a tough schedule, and I think you're missing Rashee Rice. I think the safe answer, I know the Vegas number is 11.5. I think the safe answer, I think that's one short. I think it's 12.5 for me. I'd probably even, if the Vegas number was 12.5, I might be tempted to go higher than that. But I think 12-5 feels right. But I wouldn't be stunned if it's one higher or one less than that.
I think the bill comes due for all the close victories last year, and they drop a few, 11-6, but that still wins the division, gets them at least one home game in the playoffs, and we go from there. All right, Pete, great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And as a reminder, please join us at Casey Beer Co. on Friday. I think 6 p.m. is when we start gabbing about the Chiefs.
That's right.
Come get a beer, something to eat, and talk Chiefs with us on Friday. So big thanks to our producers, Monty Davis, Randy Mason, and Suzanne Hogan. Thanks to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. This has been Sportsbeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports Podcast, and we'll do it again soon.